LangChain and vector stores. We're going to be using Qdrant as the vector store, and to begin with we're going to be using a model from Hugging Face which will be free. It's going to be a sentence transformer model, and let me just show you the overview of what we're going to do. So we're going to be using LangChain, and we're going to extract some text from Alice in Wonderland. We're going to put those chunks and embed them into a Qdrant vector store. Using the Qdrant client, we will then be able to make free queries on that data. In the second part, we will look to use OpenAI, and now depending upon your vector database vendor, that could well be Pinecone or another. We're using Hugging Face embeddings here. If you are using OpenAI, then that would be import OpenAI there. And then you've got text loader as well, so see how those work in a sec. If you want to know more about a particular model, go to expert.net, and I've just searched for this particular model we're going to be using. It's 420 megabytes, so it's not too bulky to download. Trained on 1 billion plus training pairs. Load text, split documents into chunks. So we've got Alice in Wonderland. Obviously this would be your own private data, on-premise data if you're in a business organization. I've obviously just used, because of sort of copyright and everything, I've just used this book which is publicly available. There we see, if you just don't have to use what I use, but if you want to use Alice in Wonderland, then it's free. And what you'll need to do is just actually get the text from it, which you've got all these different formats. I just copied it into a .txt plain text file. There you go. So that's all the text. But imagine this is kind of academic data, business data, reports, whatever. Loader equals text loader, and then you put in the path to your text. Then we split it with chunk size 1000, overlap 0. You may wish to go for something like, this is how many character overlap, and if you want to be a bit more precise, then you would increase that. That would then use more tokens because you'd have more chunks. But yeah, you may want to put in something like 100 there. Docs equal text splitter, split documents doc. So what you're doing is you're splitting documents, and then with those documents you are putting them into the vector database, which you're loading them into memory. And this is based on an example. I can't remember whether this was the Qdrant example or LangChain. They both refer to the same example actually. If you're unfamiliar with Qdrant, I like it because it's very easy to start up, just these 2 lines. When it's running, it looks like this. So sudo, if you're on Ubuntu, you may need to just use sudo, then docker run, then the port is 6333. You specify the storage location if you want to persist the data. In this particular occasion, we're not, but you need to, it's good to be aware of that. It's written using Actix, which is a Rust framework for writing APIs and web backends. You can see your requests as you make them here. So that's Qdrant. I've mentioned it before, so you can go back to my other videos and see more about Qdrant if you want. I prefer Qdrant because you're able to experiment and create as many new collections as you want. Pinecone is slightly less. I don't think you can make quite so many with those. So the similarity search, we're actually going to do a similarity search using Qdrant. So import Qdrant_client. If you don't have that already, you just need to do pip install Qdrant-client. Then your client, you just need to specify you may see that as that's the URL, as they call it. API key. With their example, as you can see, I've got this warning, API key is used with unsecure connection. I think that warning is primarily there in case you are using the Qdrant Cloud version. So yeah, you don't need an API key for a local instance. That's their comment. I've just left that in there. Right, so we're now ready to query the data. So we've downloaded the text, we've split it into chunks, and we've inserted it into the database. This is the LangChain syntax. If you're just using Qdrant, you would then use something like client.upsert, and you'd also do create collection. But this is LangChain have basically made a wrapper for each vector database vendor. So Qdrant.from documents, and you're passing in your documents and the embedding. So embeddings comes from here. So embeddings is basically telling it which sentence transformer to use. So you're saying use this transformer, use these documents, store your stuff in the memory, give it a collection name, and then all of that you put into an object called Qdrant. So to do the similarity search, let me just go down to here. Make a query. What color was the rabbit? It's simple as that. And then you call Qdrant, so that's the object that we made here. And that object, you can then use the method similarity underscore search, pass it query. Query, what's the color of the rabbit? When you run that, you get an object called found docs, and if you do run on found docs, you will get, and I've left as is. I haven't passed it for the content or just for the first result or anything. So I just wanted to show all of them. So you've got a score here. So they go down in descending order. So 53.6%, 53.4%, 49%. So obviously we know the rabbit is white. So if we search for white, the first result, white rabbit, and the second result, white rabbit, they're so similar, 53, 53. The other results further down, I don't think they actually mention white rabbit. They mention maybe the color, and then they also maybe mention the rabbit separately. Yeah, if we do this, we might only find 2, I would expect. There's more than that, but in this bunch of text, there's only 2. There's more further down because that's where I've processed this bit further. So close that. So from Qdrant similarity search, we found 5 results, and those are blocks of text which we could then go off and parse. You could use regular expressions. You could do whatever you want. For instance, if you're doing, like I did with findthatbit.com, which is a great site, which I'd recommend you to go to, shameless plug. If you go to here, you could just go to, say, you want to find all Bitcoin related videos where they're talking about water, which is surprisingly, it's quite often. Do water. Yeah, you see, look. So this has done a similarity search based on the subtitles of YouTube videos related to Bitcoin. So back to what I was talking about, if you wanted to do, for instance, a little 200-word synopsis of a video, you could just take the Qdrant similarity search output, and that would be sufficient. You wouldn't need to parse it with the crux of the topic, anything that costs money. So now we're talking about something that does cost money. We're talking about OpenAI, and yeah, even with testing, it's not cheap. just a few little test runs, and before you know it, you're up to 30, 40, 50p. And yeah, you do that every day, you know, it's going to be $30, $40 a month in just for testing out your. It is a pity how you can't just get like a developer account or I don't know, 30 free or however many free requests per day, but it is what it is. Import OS, that's to get the API keys, which is just off the edge of the screen because you don't need to see them. Temperature is 0, so the temperature keeps 0, then that makes your results more accurate. That's what you need to have for things where the answer is, how should we say, not creative. If you want a creative answer, then you change temperature to something more than 0, but typically less than 1. I think it's still between 0 and 1. Don't quote me on that. Right, this is another thing I wanted to show you. We've got vectorDBQA, which has, if you use that, you will get a message. vectorDBQA is deprecated. Please use from LangChain.chains import RetrievalQA. So that was the old bit, or rather, that's the old bit. Then that's the new one. And what you do is you actually use your object that you created with your vector store, just to kind of keep the syntax in sync with the example that I was looking at on here, the LangChain documentation. They just said retriever equals doc search. So I changed my variable to be called doc search. That's why I've done that on there. But you could just have easily put Qdrant.asRetriever. So what we're doing here is we're using RetrievalQA, the RetrievalQA class from _chain_type method with your model stuff. And this is the new bit, or different to what you may see in some. This is really new. I think it's new as of past month or two. If you look at 2023 March, say on Medium, you'll still find documentation everywhere that's still referencing that. But as I say, it's deprecated. So probably bored of that now. Let's go straight to actually what color is the rabbit. Response equals qa.rum with the question. So what is QA? QA is what we've just seen here. That's where we set up the question answer. So when you run that, let's just go. I think it might work. Still got this stuff in memory. Actually, if I just add in there, we'll just check response. There you go. The rabbit was white. So once you've, the other thing you need to do is register for the SERP API and import the SERP API wrapper. And that will enable you to use OpenAI with that will allow you to search the internet with OpenAI. Obviously, OpenAI was made and cut off at, I think it was tail end of 2021, and it doesn't have internet access, so you need to give it a tool. If you're using a prompt, you could kind of pass in a prompt. We're not going to use a prompt here, we're going to use the tools. This is more of a demo about using the tools. So we're going to pass it the tools equals tools, and tool, what are tools? Tools are where we're telling it to use this search API. And what we want it to do is go off and find the lyrics, the song lyrics, based on the response. And what was the response? The response was the answer to our question about what color was the rabbit in Alice in Wonderland. So once we've done that, I'm not going to run it again because I'm running up a fortune on it's costing a fortune with all these requests, but yeah, there we go. So what it does is it goes off and it does the search. Then it knows it has to go and get the song lyrics. And then it goes and gets the pink Pink white rabbit lyrics. Pink is actually the color of the rabbit's eyes, so yeah. Okay, so using OpenAI, we're going to use the RetrievalQA, and we now know the color of the rabbit, excluding its eyes. If we left the eye color in, it would complicate things, and we don't want that. So response equals white. Now we allow the user to input the question, and we're going to be just using standard Python input. We're going to be using tools, so this will specify that SERP API must be used. So we're going to fetch live price information from the internet based upon what we've extracted from our private data. Obviously, Alice in Wonderland is not private data, but we can imagine it is. Template. Answer the question below in less than 4 words. So we don't want it to get carried away with its response. We want a price. Prompt equals prompt template. Input variables QZ. Template equals template, which is this. And then we'll use the prompt down here. We'll just format the prompt, and then we'll pass in our next query plus the response, which the response is the original response, which equals white, if you remember from up here. Good, so hopefully that makes sense. When I've run it, it's worked, and I've run it so many times, but the final answer is £25, which actually is correct. So it's got live price information from the internet. Go on then, I'll just run it once more. So my query, I'm based in the UK, so I'm just going to tell it to go off and get the price of 5 litres of gloss paint. And it's going to know the colour. How's it going to know the colour? It's going to know the colour because we're passing in response with the prompt. And you see it knows that it's looking for white paint. £25, there we go. And yeah, I'm going to call it a day there because I'm racking up the money on the usage on the billing on OpenAI. So that's the OpenAI version, which will go off and fetch you price information. But if you just actually want, information from your own data, you don't have to use OpenAI, and obviously you can just use the free models. And there are large language models which you can use to go off and do stuff, but you'll probably find most of them are examples and tutorials, and they're really just querying the State of the Union address. So I've experimented with that, and it took quite a lot of my time, and I didn't really make any headway, and it was very slow. And I was finding that the answers were pretty much like this anyway. So I'd encourage you to experiment with Qdrant. It's really robust. Say you just fire it up in a Docker container, and it's so straightforward. So yeah, it's just very robust, very fast, and it's free. Nothing against Pinecone, and say Pinecone, I've got some amazing tutorials as well. So I'll leave that there. Thanks for watching, and check back soon for some more videos.